Now today we're going to hear about different perspectives on renewables from policymakers. We're hosted by Claude Turmes, who's well known in the European Parliament for defending the cause of renewables. And he's been steering the latest recast of the Renewables directives. So we'll hear from him. He'll be giving an introductory statement. Philippe Lowe, Director General at the Commission's DG Energy. Mel Kendal, who's Councillor at the Hampshire City Council. And finally, Magued Eldaief from GE Energy, who's going to give us more of a private sector point of view on things. We have about an hour for this debate, so let me stress to our speakers that you should try and make your statements short, no longer than 5 minutes. We're trying to open the floor afterwards from questions from you, so please think while we're debating about some questions you would like to put to the some of the speakers, and we'll try and get as much of those in as possible. I think I'm done. Claude, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So where are we today on renewables? I think we are in the beginning of a success story, which has already started in some countries like Spain, Denmark, Germany, which were basically the early front runners on these technologies, and they are already in a situation where they have a lot of benefits, also industrial and jobs benefits. And the Renewable Energy Directive is basically an instrument to bring this successful story from 3 countries to 27 countries. In this Renewable Energy Directive, we have binding targets, which are specified for the different national circumstances. We have binding national action plans, and one of the positive outcomes of the last months was that the national action plans which have now been sent in are promising. So the government's pledge that they will even overachieve the 20% overall European target, and there is a lot of good ideas. The litmus test will of course be now to transform, at least in some countries, the good ideas which are in these national action plans into real law and real actions also on the local level and on the regional level. So renewables is of course a mix of a well-designed national support scheme plus authorization regimes which are not too burdensome, plus training, plus bringing investors and together. So all this must fit in order to get the rollout. And one figure which I think is not enough prominent in Brussels and also with the financial circles is that 70% plus of all investments in supply of the next 10 years will have to be renewables in order to get to the binding targets. So 70% of all investments in the power sector, but also a lot of what will have to come in the heating and cooling sector. Maybe in transport it's still a bit different, but in the power sector and heating and cooling, we must invest big into renewables in order to get to the targets.
You know that in 2009, the promotion of renewables was a crucial part of a strategy towards a low-carbon economy. And this requires support to a number of new technologies, at least new technologies in application, if not in original basic technology. So whether it's wind, solar, wind offshore, onshore, solar, voltaic, solar, thermal, bioenergy in the first generation, bioenergy in the second generation, we recognized then in 2009 that it was necessary to start developing these technologies if we were going to meet emissions objectives. By the way, renewables don't just contribute to sustainability of the way in which we produce energy, but they also allow us to reduce considerably the dependency of Europe on fossil fuels from outside the European Union, something which is not said very often in public, but I'd just like to repeat that it is a crucial element of this strategy. Now, a lot of people have examined our recent documents and looked at the 2020, our new 2020 strategy for energy policy and said, well, the number of times you mention renewables isn't enough. I just want to point out that both in the infrastructure package, which we published in November, and in the latest communication on renewables, we renew the commitment to renewables. We stress how important it is to develop the infrastructures needed to integrate those renewables into the grids of Europe. And we also stress the importance of balancing out variable sources of electricity with other sources in order to optimize Europe's delivery of electricity in particular. And there it's quite clear that renewables will represent in 2020 about a third of all electricity generation. And if we're to meet the 80 to 95% objective of reduction in emissions in 2050, then the percentage of renewables will be significantly higher than that in the road towards 2050.
More than 60%?
More than 60%, as Claude says. He's got all the figures in the back of his head. He invented them. Now, I want to say that, as Claude has mentioned, we've had the plans of the member states, which are designed to show how they will achieve their, in principle, binding targets for percentage of renewables as part of energy consumption. As you know, they differ in their ambition from country to country. As mentioned by Claude, we've got 3 countries which, not only for reasons of climate change policy, but also in terms of developing a competitive technology, have gone much further than other countries: Denmark, Spain, Germany. There are other countries, too, who have a very strong proportion of biomass and bioenergy in their proposed mix. And overall, it looks as if there will be attainment of that 20% target. Now, of course, these targets, are they market-driven or are they policy-driven? I think the fact is that they're both, really. You can't say that immediately all companies, energy companies in the European Union, or all potential new entrants are under some obligations to it. The obligations are on the member states to ensure that systems are in place. And of course, that's led to a lot of debate because you know really the 4 hurdles which all these competitive technologies need to meet. They need to be technologically robust. Can we depend on them? They need to be commercially viable. That is, at some point, these technologies must deliver energy at grid parity. However, in a world in which we've internalized external costs of emissions. Thirdly, they've got to be capable of being, in the meantime, supported by national budgets without excessive subsidy in relation to what's going on. And fourthly, well, the public has got to accept some of the construction of infrastructures for generation and for transport, which are necessary to integrate renewables. That's not evident. However, it isn't any more evident for CCS technologies or for nuclear. All these technologies are subject effectively to these 4 thresholds. Now, the electricity industry keeps saying to us, as Claude has said, that the playing field is being tipped unevenly by all these subsidies. you know, if we really wanted to go to an emissions-free economy, all we have to do is to raise the price of carbon. Well, I think that's a flawed argument because without new technologies, it's not possible to get there. So the competition was already distorted by the lack of internalization of the external costs of emissions in the electricity markets. Therefore, it's completely natural that there should be effectively what is a bet by European countries that some of these technologies will reach the thresholds needed in order to provide us with viable energy. And that's the basis upon which we support what's going on, and we give an extra drive to that. I wouldn't say entirely that there isn't a need to find some degree of harmonization in support for renewables as time goes on across the European Union, because the more our grids are interconnected, the more a fantasy it is to suppose that national support schemes are only for the benefit of national markets. This is patently not true, just as much as it's not true that Austrian consumers don't consume nuclear energy. They do already today. They do it because the NBW is supplying energy into Austria. But no one talks about it, but I'm just telling you what is the reality. Now, the open market, the open, competitive, integrated market in Europe is a vital element in ensuring the future of renewables, because if we can make sure that the grids are open for new entrants, we're actually guaranteeing too that new entrants based upon renewables can develop markets, often under considerable pressure from the incumbents. Now, is there a financing renewables gap? Well, I think that the fundamental message we receive from the financial institutions is predictability. Give us a framework for investment which gives us some guarantee, not that you will always subsidize at the same rate the feed-in, the tariffs for renewables, but that you will actually guarantee us that when we make our investment, we are making it knowing that we can dimension the risks in a reasonable way. So there's been a lot of legitimate criticism, in our view, of those countries who've decided to change retroactively the schemes. That's no good. And it's also no good if every government which comes in changes the regime every 2 or 3 years. We've got to have some kind of framework which allows support to go on. But at the same time, on private side, it's got to be recognized, the bet on new technologies is that you'll come down the cost curve as you roll out the generation capacity and use it effectively, and costs should come down, as they are coming down in wind in particular, and also in some, to a large extent, in solar.